I have this corner in my living room. I started calling it the corner of good intentions.
No, that sounds ominous. What's in there?
Well, let's see. Currently, it's home to a really nice acoustic guitar that I think I've touched maybe twice in 4 years. There's also a yoga mat that's gathering this fascinating little ecosystem of dust bunnies. And on top of that is a stack of Spanish workbooks that just, I swear, they stare at me in silent judgment every single time I walk to the kitchen.
Yes. The graveyard of hobbies past. We all have one. For me, it's a watercolor set that has now, I think, fossilized into a solid brick.
It's actually painful, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not that I don't want to learn these things. I mean, I really, really do.
Yeah.
I watch a movie, and the main character sits down at a piano having never played a note in their life.
Yeah.
And then there's this montage. It looks like maybe 3 days of them just staring intensely at sheet music.
The classic Hollywood training montage.
And then suddenly, boom, they're playing Mozart. Flawlessly.
It's so satisfying to watch, but, it completely sets up for failure. It's a total lie.
It's a complete lie. Because when I turn off the TV and I look at that guitar, the reality just crashes down. I do the mental math. I think, okay, to get that good, I'm looking at, what, 5 years?
Yeah.
10 years? I think about that 10,000-hour rule.
Yeah.
And I just feel this crushing weight.
It feels insurmountable.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think, I don't have 5 years to master this. I barely have 5 minutes before my next meeting.
And that feeling right there, that's what stops most people dead in their tracks before they even start. We've been conditioned to assume that mastery is a direct function of time, specifically a lot of time.
And that is the exact myth we are going to bust today. Because what if the problem isn't that we're lazy? What if it's not that we lack some kind of natural talent? What if the problem is just biology? Or maybe, more accurately, that we're completely ignoring our own biology.
That is the core question, which is why today we're doing a deep dive into the science of rapid skill acquisition by Peter Hollins. And I mean, the subtitle really says it all.
It does. Okay.
It's Advanced Methods to Learn, Remember, and Master New Skills and Information.
So Hollins is essentially saying, well, that's the whole long grind thing.
Yeah, that it's often just a waste of time.
Right. He's arguing that, mastery doesn't have to take years of blood, sweat, and tears.
But there's a huge if there, a really big one.
And that is,
if and only if you understand how your brain actually wires itself up in the first place.
It's about working smarter, not just putting in more hours.
Exactly. The whole premise is moving away from that brute force approach to learning and instead using, neuroscience, psychology, and some really strategic habit formation to kind of hack the process.
Okay, so our mission today, this is pretty exciting. We are going to build a toolkit for you, the listener. Whether you're trying to learn to code or pick up a new language for a trip or get really, really good at Excel for work.
Or finally play that guitar.
We're going to deconstruct how to actually do that in record time. And this isn't about just, cramming to pass a test.
No, this is about genuine, long-term skill acquisition. For the busy professional, the student, the curious mind, anyone who feels like they don't have enough time.
So we've got a bit of a roadmap for this. We're going to start with this philosophy of deconstruction.
Yep. Then we're going to get into why your current practice routine is probably, and I don't mean this unkindly, useless.
Okay, looking forward to that. Then we'll cover something called chunking.
And finally, how to hack your memory so you don't forget everything you've learned by next week.
Perfect. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with that idea of deconstruction because, when I decide I want to learn something, let's take Spanish, from my corner of shame, I usually I'll buy a massive textbook and try to read it from page 1.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Exactly. And I quit by page 10 when they start talking about subjunctive moods.
And that is the classic error. Hollins calls this the wall of information.
The wall of information. I like that.
Yeah. When you look at a skill as a whole, like the Spanish language or photography or coding, it is massive. It's heavy. It's completely overwhelming.
It is.
Your brain looks at the sheer volume of vocabulary, grammar, syntax, exceptions to the rules, and it effectively just shuts down. It triggers an anxiety response.
So what's the alternative? I can't just learn, half a language.
Well, actually, you kind of can, and you should. This is where Hollins brings in the concept of deconstruction, and he applies a very famous principle to it.
Let me guess. The Pareto principle.
You got it, the 80-20 rule.
Okay, so just for a quick refresher, this is the idea that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort?
Exactly. Vilfredo Pareto was this Italian economist, and he first noticed it when he saw that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by just 20% of the population. But it turns out this distribution applies to almost everything.
80% of sales come from 20% of the clients.
Yeah, right. Or you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. And in learning, this is the key, 80% of your proficiency in a skill will come from mastering just 20% of the sub-skills.
Okay, I have to push back a little here because this sounds great in like an MBA classroom, but in practice, doesn't this just feel like cheating? If I only learn 20% of something, am I not just a 20% expert, a total novice?
That's the intuitive trap. And it's a good question. It feels like you're taking a shortcut, and we're taught shortcuts are bad. But it's not cheating, it's efficiency. Let's use language to really prove this point. In the English language, there's something like 170,000 words in current use. That's the 100%.
Okay, no one's learning all of those.
No.
Yeah.
If you tried, you would literally die before you finish. But if you look at the data of daily conversation, the top 100 most frequently used words account for about 50% of everything we say.
50% from just 100 words.
50%. And it gets better. The top 1,000 most common words. That accounts for nearly 89% of ordinary writing and speech.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me that knowing just 1,000 words basically makes you functionally fluent in almost any normal situation?
Functionally, yes. Now, you're not going to be able to write a doctoral thesis on 18th century poetry with those 1,000 words.
Right.
But can you navigate a country, order food, make friends, understand the news, have a meaningful conversation? Absolutely. That is the 80-20 rule in action. You ruthlessly ignore the obscure stuff, the other 80%, to focus entirely on the high-frequency, high-impact words.
The source material uses that great example with the guitar that, it hit me so hard because I actually tried to learn guitar once and I failed miserably for this exact reason.
Let me guess. You started with music theory, scales.
I did. I was trying to be a good student. I thought this is how you're supposed to do it. So I'm trying to memorize scales. I'm trying to understand how to read sheet music. I didn't play a single recognizable song for 2 solid months.
And that just kills the momentum, doesn't it? It's all pain and no reward.
Completely. I quit.
And Hollins points this out. If you want to learn guitar to, say, play songs around a campfire, the 20% focus is just learning the few basic chords. G, C, D, maybe an E minor.
Right. If you learn those 4 chords, you can play thousands of pop songs, everything from the Beatles to Taylor Swift.
Precisely. And by doing that, you get the 80% result almost immediately, which is actually playing music. You get that reward, you feel like a musician.
That feeling builds momentum. It makes you want to come back the next day.
Exactly. You can fill in the complex music theory later, if you even want to, but if you start with the theory, you'll probably quit before you ever strum a single tune.
So the step-by-step process here is, 1, break the skill into the smallest possible pieces, the sub-skills. 2, identify which of those little pieces give you the biggest bang for your buck.
The 20%.
And 3, ruthlessly ignore the rest, at least for now.
And ruthlessly ignore is absolutely the right phrase. It takes a weird kind of discipline to not try to learn everything at once.
We have this completionist urge, right? We want to read the book cover to cover.
We do. We feel guilty skipping chapters. But Hollins is saying, don't. You have to be a surgeon. Be precise. Just read the chapters that matter for your immediate goal.
This whole philosophy of deconstruction, it really shifts the entire mindset. It goes from I need to know everything to I need to know the right things to get started.
Yes. It turns that insurmountable mountain into, a small, manageable pile of rocks, and you can climb a pile of rocks.
Okay, so we've deconstructed. We've picked our 20%. We know what we want to learn now. Now we actually have to do the work. And this brings us to the next big topic in the book, which I have to admit made me feel a little bit guilty about my own habits.
Yeah.
And that is repetition versus deliberate practice.
Yes. This is where most people, even with the best intentions, waste almost all of their time. There is this very, very common misconception that practice makes perfect.
I've heard that my entire life. Yeah. My piano teacher had it on a poster in her studio.
We all did. And it's wrong. Or at least it's dangerously incomplete. A better phrase, which Hollins emphasizes, is practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent.
Oof. That is a terrifying distinction.
It should be. Think about it. If you practice swinging a golf club incorrectly for an hour every day, you are not getting better at golf.
Oh,
You are getting better at swinging the club wrong. You are becoming a world-class master of the incorrect swing. You are solidifying a bad habit.
okay, so let's dig into the science of that. Why does repetition, even bad repetition, solidify something so strongly in the brain?
It comes down to a substance in our brains called myelin.
Myelin, right.
So think of your nerve fibers, your neurons, like bare copper wires carrying electricity.
Right.
Every time you perform an action like moving your fingers to a guitar fret or pronouncing a foreign word, you fire an electrical signal down that wire.
Okay.
Myelin is a fatty substance that acts like insulation. And every time you fire that specific circuit, a little bit more myelin wraps around that nerve fiber.
So it's like the rubber coating on an extension cord.
Exactly like that. And the more you practice a specific circuit, the thicker and thicker that layer of myelin gets. And what does thicker insulation do? It makes the signal travel faster, and it prevents energy leakage. It makes the action smooth, fast, and effortless.
So if I practice a mistake, you are wrapping insulation around the mistake. You are protecting it. You are making that mistake faster, more efficient, and much, much harder to unlearn later on.
Wow. Okay. That's why unlearning a bad habit is so much harder than learning a good one from scratch.
Infinitely harder. You have to literally tear down that insulation and build a new pathway. This is why Hollins makes this huge distinction between what he calls mindless repetition and deliberate practice.
I think I'm a serial victim of mindless repetition. I'll sit down to work on something. Maybe I'll have a podcast on in the background, and I just kind of go through the motions. It feels like work, but is it actually doing anything? It's what some neuroscientists call zombie practice. It feels productive because you're putting in the time, and you might even be tired afterwards. But deliberate practice is completely different. It is highly structured. It requires intense, single-minded focus. And Hollins outlines some very specific components for it.
Okay, what are those components? How do we know if we're doing deliberate practice versus just, zombie practice?
First, you have to have a clear, specific, and measurable goal for that session. Not just, I'm going to practice Spanish today.
That's too vague.
Way too vague. It needs to be, in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to master the past tense conjugation of these 10 specific verbs, and I will test myself until I get them right 3 times in a row.
Wow. Okay, so that is very, very granular.
Extremely granular. Second, and this is the part that everyone hates, you must work on your weaknesses, not your strengths.
Ugh, I hate that.
Everyone hates that. It's what he calls the discomfort factor. When we sit down to practice, we naturally gravitate toward the things we're already good at.
Of course. It feels good. It's fun to play the part of the song you know perfectly. It makes you feel talented.
It's a great ego boost, but you're not learning. You're just reviewing or performing. True learning, deep learning only happens in the struggle.
So if you're not frustrated, if you're not making mistakes and then correcting them, you're not really in the learning zone.
You are not in the zone of deep learning. Hollins is crystal clear on this. If it feels easy, you are probably not improving. You're just treading water.
That's actually a really good heuristic. If you're smiling while you're practicing, you might be doing it wrong. You should be grimacing a little bit.
A little bit of a grimace, yes. You should feel that mental strain. And that strain is what leads to the third and maybe most critical component. You need an immediate feedback loop.
A feedback loop.
You must know right in that moment if you did the thing right or wrong.
Why is the immediate part so important there? Can't I just, record myself and check my work later?
You can, but it's wildly inefficient if you want to be fast. It goes back to that myelin. Remember, if you play a wrong note on the guitar and you don't realize it's wrong immediately, your brain starts to encode that pathway. It starts wrapping it in myelin.
I see.
If you practice it wrong 5 times before you check the recording, you might have to practice it right 50 times to undo that damage. You need a feedback loop. Whether that's a teacher saying no, stop, or a computer program that flashes red, or a recording of yourself that you listen back to immediately that flags the error instantly.
So you stop the bad wiring before it sets.
Before the concrete dries. So if you're learning a language, don't just speak into the void. Use an app that has voice recognition and corrects your pronunciation on the spot. Or work with a tutor who will interrupt you mid-sentence.
That sounds incredibly annoying, to be constantly corrected.
It is. It feels annoying. It feels like you can't get any momentum. But it speeds up the long-term process exponentially by preventing those bad habits from ever forming.
Okay, so this is huge. We've got the 80-20 rule to know what to learn, and we've got deliberate practice to know how to actually practice it effectively.
Right.
Now let's talk about the brain itself. The book has this fantastic section on thinking like an expert and these concepts of mental models and chunking.
This is so fascinating because it really explains the tangible difference between how a beginner sees the world and how an expert sees it. And it all comes down to something called cognitive load.
Cognitive load, that's basically the amount of mental effort that's being used in your working memory at any given moment, right?
Exactly. And the thing about working memory is that it's incredibly limited. The common number you hear is that it can only hold about 7 items at once. But newer research suggests it might be as low as 4.
4 things, that's it.
That's it. So when a beginner looks at a chessboard or a complex line of code or a football field, what do they see?
They see a million little details. They see individual pawns and knights and bishops. They see specific words and symbols in the code. They see 22 individual players running around.
Exactly. They see isolated data points. And because there are 32 pieces on a chessboard, their working memory is instantly, catastrophically overwhelmed. They can't process it. But an expert,
They don't see the pieces.
they don't see the pieces. They see patterns. They see relationships. They see the Queen's Gambit decline formation or a cover 2 defense.
They see the underlying structure.
Right. And this is the process of chunking. It's the cognitive process of grouping separate pieces of information into larger, meaningful blocks or chunks. A really simple example is a phone number. If I read you a string of 10 random digits, 55586755309, it's really hard to memorize.
Yeah, my brain is already full.
But if I say it as 555-867-53009, you can remember it instantly.
Right, because you've turned 10 separate items into just 3 items.
Yeah.
3 chunks.
Precisely. You've reduced the mental load by like 70%. Hollins argues that to learn rapidly, you have to actively look for these chunks. You have to force yourself to stop trying to memorize isolated facts and start looking for the underlying web that connects them all.
The book used a reading analogy for this that I thought was just perfect.
Oh yeah, the reading one is great. Think about how a child learns to read. They look at the letter C, then the letter A, then the letter T. They are processing 3 separate items.
CAT.
Right. An adult reads the word cat as a single image, a single chunk. But a speed reader, or a scholar, they don't even see the word cat. They scan an entire paragraph and absorb the idea. They read concepts. They've chunked words into sentences, sentences into arguments.
So for our listener, applying this means you shouldn't just dive into the raw data of what you're learning.
Right.
You need to step back first and ask, what is the system here? What are the recurring patterns? What are the rules of this game?
Yes. Always look for the skeleton before you try to understand the individual muscles. It speeds up your processing time immensely. If you're learning history, don't just memorize a list of dates. Step back and ask, what was the economic model that drove this conflict? Once you understand the model, the chunk, the dates and names, just hang on to it naturally.
It's like building a bookshelf before you buy the books. If you just buy the books first, they end up in a messy pile on the floor.
That's a perfect analogy. Mental models are the bookshelf. You're building the structure to hold the information.
Okay, this is all fantastic. But I want to move to what might be the most practical and for me the most painful part of the book, the science of memory. Because I can learn something today, I can really understand it, and then 3 days later, poof, it is gone. Vanished.
You are not alone. That is a universal human experience. It's called the forgetting curve.
The forgetting curve.
Yeah, it's a concept that dates all the way back to the 19th century from a psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. And he showed basically that as soon as you learn something new, your brain immediately starts the process of deleting it.
It's like a leaky bucket. You're pouring knowledge in the top and it's just draining out the bottom.
It is. But Hollins makes a really important point here. The goal isn't to never forget. Forgetting is actually a natural and necessary part of the learning mechanism. It's your brain's way of clearing out noise and irrelevant information.
Okay.
The goal is to interrupt the forgetting process at the most optimal moment. And the strategy for that is called spaced repetition.
We've touched on this concept in previous deep dives, but how does Hollins apply it specifically to the idea of rapid skill acquisition?
He argues that it's the absolute antidote to cramming. We all did it in college, right? You study for 10 hours straight right before the exam.
Oh yeah, the all-nighter fueled by coffee and panics.
Right. And you might even pass the exam, but what happens 2 weeks later? You remember nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Zero retention.
Yeah.
I honestly don't remember a single fact from my college geology class. I know rocks were involved. That's it.
Because you never gave your brain a chance to consolidate the information for long-term storage. Spaced repetition is the opposite of cramming. It means you practice something once, and then you wait. You deliberately let time pass.
You let yourself start to forget it.
Yes, you wait until you are just on the verge of forgetting it. It's that moment where you have to struggle a little bit, you have to really dig deep to recall the information.
And then you review it.
Exactly. And that little bit of struggle, that mental effort to retrieve the fading memory, sends a powerful signal to your brain. It says, hey, this piece of information is important. I had to work to get it back. Keep this one.
Whereas if you review it when it's still fresh in your mind, your brain doesn't have to work.
The brain stays lazy. It says, oh yeah, I know this, and doesn't strengthen the connection at all. You have to systematically space the sessions out. You review it after 1 day, then after 3 days, then after a week, then after a month.
You're constantly expanding the gap between reviews.
You're testing the durability of the memory and strengthening it each time you successfully recall it.
And this connects directly to the other big concept here. Active recall versus passive review. I feel so called out by this one. My default version of studying is rereading my notes and maybe highlighting some stuff. It makes me feel very productive and studious.
Which Hollins calls the trap. It's also known as the fluency illusion. Rereading feels like effective work because it's easy and comfortable. You look at your notes and your brain goes, oh yeah, I recognize that. I know that.
But that's not knowing. That's just recognizing.
That is the crucial distinction. You are experiencing passive recognition, not active retrieval. You recognize the text on the page, but you don't actually know the material cold.
So what's the alternative? What is active recall in practice?
It's closing the book. It's putting your notes away. It's looking at a blank wall or a blank piece of paper and asking yourself, what were the 3 key components of deliberate practice? And then forcing yourself to answer out loud or write it down from scratch without peeking.
It's agonizing. It's so much harder.
It is mentally taxing. It can feel like it hurts a little. But that pain, that strain, is the feeling of neural pathways being built and strengthened in real time. If you're not doing active recall, constantly testing yourself with flashcards, quizzes, or just explaining the concept to an empty room, you aren't really studying efficiently, you're just browsing.
There's one more biological factor here that the book highlights, and I think people, myself included, neglect it constantly. Sleep.
Oh, absolutely massive. It's probably the most powerful learning enhancement tool we have, and it's free.
I always thought of sleep as just rest, like turning off a car engine to let it cool down. But Hollins says it's actually when most of the real work gets done.
It's much more active than that. Think of it less like turning off the car and more like the night shift coming into the warehouse to organize everything.
I like that.
While you are awake and learning, you're gathering data. That new information sits in a part of your brain called the hippocampus, which is like your brain's short-term memory. It's RAM. It's very volatile and has limited capacity.
So if you don't sleep, that data just gets overwritten by the next day's experiences.
Exactly. This is why the all-nighter is the worst possible thing you can do for learning. When you sleep, specifically during deep sleep and REM sleep, your brain goes to work. It replays the neural patterns you fired during the day, and it transfers the important memories from the fragile hippocampus to the neocortex, which is like your brain's long-term hard drive.
It literally rewires itself while you're asleep.
It does. The connections between neurons are strengthened. It's called memory consolidation. You are literally learning while you doze.
I've heard there are studies about this with motor skills.
Yes, incredible studies showing that if you practice a motor skill, like a piano skill or a sequence in a video game, and then you get a good night's sleep, you will actually be measurably better at it the next morning without any additional practice. Your brain was practicing for you while you slept.
That is just incredible. So go to bed is now valid, science-backed study advice.
It is the best advice. If you cut sleep in order to study more, you are just filling a bucket that has a giant hole in the bottom.
All right, let's shift gears a bit to the more strategic side of things, strategy and environment. Hollins has a section on the balance between speed and depth. And this is a common criticism, right? That rapid skill acquisition must mean shallow learning. Like, sure, I learned the 4 guitar chords, but do I really know music?
It's a very fair critique, and the book addresses it head-on with the concept of just-in-time learning.
Just in time. That sounds like something from supply chain management, like the Toyota manufacturing strategy.
That's exactly where the idea comes from. Toyota doesn't keep millions of tires sitting in a giant warehouse just in case. They have the tires arrive at the factory exactly when the car on the assembly line is ready for them to be installed.
Okay.
In learning, we tend to do the opposite. We hoard knowledge. We buy 5 books on a topic before we've even started. We try to learn advanced theories that we have no way of using yet.
We're hoarding mental inventory.
And just like physical inventory, it rots, it decays. You forget it because it's not relevant. Hollins argues that a proper learning structure allows for both speed and depth over time. You learn what you need right when you need it. Don't try to learn the advanced guitar soloing technique until you can flawlessly play the basic rhythm track.
Because if you learn the advanced technique too early, you have no context for it. You can't apply it. It just becomes this piece of abstract trivia that you'll almost certainly forget.
Exactly. But by waiting until you actually need it, the learning becomes immediately relevant and sticky. It connects to a real problem you're trying to solve right now, which makes it much more memorable.
So it's about building your knowledge layer by layer in context.
And it's also about managing your energy. This is another big takeaway for me. Your attention, your focus is a finite resource. It is a battery that drains throughout the day.
We've all felt that, right? That brain fog that sets in after a few hours of really intense work.
And because of that, Hollins makes the case that short, intense sessions will always outperform long, tired marathon sessions.
So quantity of time is not the main metric.
Not at all. 30 minutes of intense, deliberate practice where you are fully focused, phone is off, notifications are silenced, and you are really struggling with the material is worth more than 4 hours of distracted, low-energy, half-hearted studying.
This goes right back to that busyness badge of honor we all like to wear. We like to say, I studied for 6 hours today. But if half of that was checking email and the other half was just low energy rereading,
you probably wasted 5.5 of those hours. It's much better to do some minutes of deep work and then stop, go for a walk, let your brain reset and consolidate.
And finally, let's talk about environment design. This section is really about willpower.
Or rather, the fact that we can't rely on it. Hollins is a realist. He knows that willpower is, as he says, overrated and finite. If your strategy for learning a new skill relies on you mustering up willpower every single day to start practicing, you will eventually fail.
Because one day you'll be tired or stressed or just not feeling it, and you won't be able to force yourself.
Right. The motivation just won't be there. So the solution is to design your environment to make starting so easy that it requires almost no willpower. You have to remove the friction.
Let's go back to the guitar example, because I think everyone can relate to this on some level.
Okay. If your guitar is, in its case, in the back of the closet underneath the pile of laundry, just think about the activation energy required to start practicing.
It's a lot.
You have to walk over, you have to dig it out, you have to find a spot, unclasp the case, take it out, tune it. It might only take 2 minutes, but that's enough friction for your lazy brain to say, you know what, I'll just do it tomorrow.
It's a barrier, even if it's a small one.
So what's the fix? The fix is to put the guitar on a stand right in the middle of your living room. Make it so you literally have to walk around it. If it's just sitting there, the friction to start is near zero. You can just pick it up while you're watching TV and strum for 5 minutes, and boom, you've practiced.
It's about making the desired behavior the path of least resistance.
That's the whole game. And conversely, you want to make your distractions high friction. If you're trying to learn to code on your computer, put your phone in another room. Turn it off. Make it annoying to check Instagram.
I've actually started doing that. When I need to write, I put my phone in a kitchen drawer. And it's amazing how just the tiny bit of friction of having to stand up and walk to the kitchen is enough to stop me from mindlessly checking it.
Exactly. Your brain is lazy. It wants the easiest, quickest dopamine hit. You have to rig the game so that practicing your skill is the easiest and most available option.
So we've broken down the entire book. We've got the deconstruction philosophy, the deliberate practice methods, the memory hacks, the environmental design. Now let's get critical. What's your overall verdict on the science of rapid skill acquisition?
I think it's a very, very strong resource. I would give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay, a 4. Why the 4 and not a perfect 5?
Well, let's start with the strengths, because there are a lot of them. The book is incredibly actionable. There is almost no fluff. It just cuts straight to the how-to on every single page.
It's very practical.
Very practical. It's research-backed, but it doesn't read like a dense medical journal. It's really accessible. I think it's great for students, professionals, entrepreneurs, basically anyone who needs to download information and skills into their brain quickly.
And what about the limitations? What holds it back from that 5-star rating?
I think the main limitation is that while it synthesizes all these concepts brilliantly, none of the individual concepts are strictly new. If you've read a lot in the space of learning theory books like Atomic Habits by James Clear or Peak by Anders Ericsson, you'll see a lot of overlap.
So the value is more in the synthesis and the practical framework he provides.
Exactly. The other thing is that its focus is heavily skewed toward technical or informational skills.
Right. It feels very geared toward things like, I need to learn the SQL programming language, or I need to memorize all the bones in the human body for my biology exam.
Precisely. It's a bit less clear on how you would apply the 80-20 rule to something that is purely creative and less structured, like writing a novel or painting abstract art. Those kinds of skills are much harder to deconstruct into a clean Pareto chart. You can't really just write 20% of a novel and get 80% of the result.
That's a very fair point. But for the vast majority of things that people want to learn for work or for their hobbies, languages, software, instruments, sports, it seems pretty dead on.
Oh, absolutely. For those things, it's a practical, no-nonsense manual. It really succeeds in its mission of transforming learning from this mystical talent that you either have or you don't into a clear mechanical process that anyone can follow. And that, I think, is incredibly empowering.
Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listener. If we had to summarize the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive, the Rapid Acquisition Toolkit, what are they?
Okay, first and foremost, learning is a skill. It's not a fixed trait. You can get better at getting better, so don't ever accept that you're just a slow learner.
Love that. Second, focus. Use the 80-20 rule to be a ruthless editor of your own curriculum. Don't try to boil the ocean. Find the few high-impact sub-skills, and for now, ignore the rest.
Third, purpose. You have to stop mindless repetition. It's a waste of time. Embrace deliberate practice. And remember the heuristic. If it doesn't feel at least a little bit uncomfortable, you probably aren't pushing hard enough. You have to target your weaknesses.
Fourth, strategy. You have to use your biology, not fight it. Use spaced repetition and active recall to make memories stick. Test yourself constantly and then sleep on it. Let your brain do the heavy lifting overnight.
And finally, consistency and environment. Small, focused daily progress will always beat sporadic, heroic efforts. And design your room, your space, to make starting the easiest thing in the world.
That's a fantastic summary. It takes this huge, scary idea of mastery and makes it feel, well, manageable.
And that's really the goal. You know, in a world that is changing as fast as ours is, the ability to learn new things quickly is maybe the ultimate competitive advantage. It's the one meta skill that enables all the other skills.
So, with that in mind, here's our final provocative thought for you to carry into your week. We've been talking a lot about the 80-20 rule, that 20% of your efforts produce 80% of your results.
And if you really honestly audit your day, your week, you'll find the flip side is also true, that 80% of what you do is just busy work. It's low-impact stuff that only produces 20% of your results.
So here's the question for you. If you could identify and strip away that 80% of low-value activity from your life, and you reclaimed all of that time and energy, what one skill could you finally master starting tomorrow?
What is that one thing, that language, that instrument, that piece of software that would fundamentally change your career or your life if you just felt like you had the time? Because the truth is, you probably do have the time. You just need the right strategy.
Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Keep learning.